Hi, I'm Katie.
And I'm Amy.
And this is Monumental, a small show about the big things God does in the lives of ordinary people.
Today we get to hear from Ilse Von Hagen. Ilse is from Germany. Her husband, Jürgen, is a professor and pastor, and together they have spent time here in the U.S., and more specifically with our church, which is how we've gotten to get to know her.
Yeah, today Ilse's going to share with us how she came to faith, how her husband was called into the pastorate, and how she's adjusted to life as a pastor's wife.
So their ministry has presented some unique challenges and yet really sweet fellowship. As they have a ministry to immigrants in Germany, they're just a wonderful example of what it means to love people different from yourself.
Yeah, I grew up in a family. My parents were not really believers. I mean, my father was a Catholic and he thought a lot about the Lord, but he never really came to believe in Jesus. So we actually grew up going to church, but it never really meant a whole lot to me. And I had two siblings, an older sister, younger brother. My grandmother lived together with us in the same house, and she was a believer, and she actually made us go to church.
Oh, sweet.
But it never really meant a lot to me. And the same actually with Jürgen. So he had spent years and years singing in a church choir. So he actually went to church a lot, singing. But I mean, when we met in Bonn, when we both studied, we never went to church there in Bonn together.
You never went together?
No, we never, neither one of us went to church at all during those times when we studied.
Right.
Yeah, then when I went to, I had finished my medical school in 87. Jürgen was also done with his PhD at that time. He said it would be good to spend some time in the US. So I agreed, not knowing what to expect. I agreed on staying here for 1 year. Okay. And all I was convinced of was that Americans eat nothing but canned food and chips and drink a lot of Coke. So I thought, okay, I can do this for 1 year. And I was pregnant at that time. So I was 6 months pregnant with our first child. So we came here to Bloomington, and first of all, we got a car and went on a trip going west, because this was my first time in the US. And
You wanted to see
I've
the
never
States.
seen anything.
Yeah.
So we made it out west up to the eastern part of Utah, and it was beautiful.
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah. So you had your first child here?
Yeah, and then what happened was, once we came back to Bloomington after the trip, a lot of people actually asked us whether we had a church to go to, and it was kind of an embarrassing question to us because we really didn't want to go.
Right.
And but then it happened. We went to the Bloomington Symphony. We both play instruments, and so during one of these rehearsals, an old man came up to us and he told us, "Well, there's Grace Covenant Church, and you should really come, and we see you on Sunday at 10 o'clock. So he actually made us come.
Obligated to go then,
So when you
right?
invite someone to church, we'll see you Sunday.
Exactly, that's what it is. And at that time, Grace Covenant was a fairly small church and very, very welcoming church. So we really felt very loved there. And it was very good teaching too. So actually, I went there only once before I went out to see a friend at the East Coast. So I was on a trip to see a German friend who had married an American at the East Coast, and I wanted to get to know the husband. too.
Yeah.
And well, we had a wonderful time there. And on the day I was supposed to come back to Bloomington, I had a water leakage of the amniotic fluid.
Right.
So before going to the airport, actually, we stopped briefly
The hospital.
at the hospital.
Oh, my.
And they told me, I wasn't aware really what had happened.
Right.
So they told me, you will stay here.
Yeah.
You will have your child very soon.
Oh, wow.
And she was still 7 weeks
Early.
Early.
Oh, wow.
So instead of Jürgen picking me up at the airport in Indy, he got on a flight
And
out there. And it happened that when he was in the airport, that he met one of the congregation members.
wow.
Where we had been only once. So
Right.
far. So they didn't really know us at all. I mean,
Right.
but he told us, I told Jürgen, we will pray for you for the delivery. And Jürgen told me about it, and I was so touched. I mean, I'd never heard anybody praying for me, and that really made such a big difference. And I saw people really live their faith, and he just doesn't say it; he means it. And that was very, very touching to me. And so we had our first little child, and Carolyn, and she was really precious. She was very small, tiny baby. She was 4 pounds and 10 ounces.
Oh, wow. Did you both have to stay in the hospital for a while then?
Yeah, I stayed for, I could go during the day and see my friend. So I went in several times during the day. I pumped the milk, and I could hold Carolyn and feed her and so on. So I couldn't actually stay there with her in the same hospital. But, I could see her, and she was doing really fine, so I was allowed to take her home after 10 days.
Oh, wonderful.
That was great.
Short visit.
Yeah. So we went home and people from church actually heard that we were back home, and Jürgen had been back to the church while I was still at the East Coast, and people really helped us a lot. And it was really overwhelming. I mean, we were not prepared to have the baby at that point. So we basically had almost nothing. I mean, hardly any clothes, and no stroller, no bed, no nothing. I mean, so, and also they came every night and brought us meals, and this was so neat. I mean, it was really very touching. And also somebody had a baby shower for us. We had never heard of a baby shower before. It doesn't exist in Germany.
It's
so it was so
American
sweet, and it helped us very much
that's
to
really neat.
get everything
You
for
really
the baby.
got the...
And I mean, to see all these loving, caring people.
You were really seeing for the first time Christian community. What that was.
Yeah, really. Exactly. And
so neat.
it meant an awful lot to us. And so, we really felt so welcomed in this church, and it became our family. And gradually we became believers. So we spent a lot of time with the people. People came up to see us at our house and talked about their faith to us. And we joined Bible studies, and the pastor came, and so we became believers.
Wow, that's sweet.
That's
so that
really
was really
neat. So
wonderful.
then, how did you end up in ministry? Because I know, so Jürgen's a professor and still is, but also now a pastor. Right? And you have a church. So how did you go from there to ministry?
He had become an elder we went back to Germany after 4.5 years, and we found a church over there. And then we moved again to Bonn. We found a very good church actually over there. He became an elder, and so eventually he was asked whether he would like to lead a congregation and become a pastor himself.
Wow.
So
to start a new church, or
no, not a new church. Actually, it was a church that existed for about 100 years, but it turned out to be all elderly people, elderly German people actually. So between 70 and 95, basically.
Wow,
And many of them died actually. So this happened like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. And there were also some African people in there. Africans at the church, who had been in Germany for at least 10 years, who spoke fairly well German.
They adjusted fairly well to...
So here I was becoming a pastor's wife.
Was that intimidating to you?
It was kind of intimidating. First of all, I didn't know really what was my task. What could I do?
What does that mean?
What does that mean? And but then actually quickly after that, it happened that in the summer of 2015, in the fall, this huge wave of refugees came into our country. And they came also to this little church, actually. I mean, this was literally like 1 million people coming in from Afghanistan, from Syria, from Iran, and many from Africa.
Wow.
Actually.
And they started seeking churches, or did you guys decide to go out and seek them?
Yeah, they left, they lived in a refugee home, which was very close to our church.
Okay.
And we heard about this. So we knew that they were all in a lot of need.
Yeah.
So we went out there and brought bags of clothes to them, and also food and singing and so on. And so we spread out all the clothes in the garden in front of the house. So they came, and we got to talk to them, and we invited them to church.
Yeah.
And many of the Africans actually, they came.
They
to
did
church.
come.
Yeah, they were believers,
Okay.
and they were looking for a church. And I mean, these people had gone through so much hardship. You just cannot imagine. I mean, those who came to our church, they come from Cameroon, Nigeria, and Ghana.
Wow.
And they had made this long way from their home to Libya, to the Mediterranean Sea.
Right.
And there they got into these tiny boats. Like inflatable boats with a motor.
With a little motor on them.
Yeah. And I mean, they were all crammed in these boats, like 5 times as much as they were allowed to have.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
So they were just, it was awful if you see the boats. And usually what happens is they have gas only for like going for 3 or 4 hours.
Right.
Then they run out of gas, and sometimes there's a boat wreck before actually this happens. People are drowning in the sea, and it's really so awful. And
so these were some of the stories they came with.
Yeah, they came with. So they had people dying in the sea, and they themselves were picked up by boats that came from
other boats
from Italy or Germany or whatever, like
coming to help them, and
coming to pick them up.
Wow.
And so they made it actually first to Italy, and then a lot of them want to come to Germany because they get more financial help, and at that time were actually more welcomed too. That had happened to changed too, actually.
Yeah. So they, in their long journey, they were setting out to go to Germany. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because they knew that they were welcomed.
Yeah.
And they'd have some assistance and help once they got there.
I mean, some of them were sent from their families.
Right.
Because, so they picked like one of the sons or whatever to make it to Germany, because living in their countries is so difficult, and they've, I mean, they're so poor. I mean, they can hardly live there. And so we asked some of them, didn't you know about the dangers coming to Europe? And they told us, I mean, staying at home would have mean we would have to die because of the poverty. And so there was at least a little chance to make it to Europe and be able to work and send money home. That's what the families expect them to do. But they ended up not, since they are from Africa and not really, I mean, asylum seekers. So the government actually didn't want them to stay. So they get like permits to stay for like 2 weeks, and then they have to go back into the city administration, ask for another 2 weeks, and so on. If they're lucky, it's sometimes maybe 2 months.
Right.
But it's really difficult, and they didn't get a work permit. And and how do you find an employer to give you work if you have only 2 weeks to stay and you don't know whether you get it extended over and over again?
Right.
So it was
nobody
really
wants to hire you if they think you're leaving in 2 weeks. Wow.
So eventually some of them actually got a work permit, and they do pretty well working on construction sites, maybe getting up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, which is really difficult for them.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not used to that. But some of them, make it really beautifully.
So did some of them end up having to go back? Or?
No, actually, it hadn't happened yet, but they never know. So they are in constant fear whether the police will come up at night. Usually when they do something, they come at night, pick you up. And it has happened to one that he was picked up at night, but he had asked for asylum in a different country in Europe.
Yeah.
And he hadn't stayed there long enough, so they sent him back actually to that country in order to stay until he was able to come to Germany.
Oh, wow.
But of course, when things like that happen, all the others are so afraid that something might happen to them.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they are constantly told by the city administration, we don't want you. We want you to go back. And so they are always afraid that they have to go back.
Well, it sounds like a lot of them have some pretty traumatic experiences in getting there, which I know is nowadays immigration's always been difficult. Now and in history, moving, uprooting from your home country is usually born out of a great need, war, escaping persecution. I mean, that's kind of the nature of immigration. For a lot of them, I'm sure at least when they first land in your city, that they're kind of fragile. Is that probably accurate? They've left either their whole families behind and they're by themselves trying to make it.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes we have one who just left, his wife had died in Africa. He left the 3 children he had with his sister and went all by himself because he thought after a while I can bring the kids to Germany too.
Right.
But that hadn't worked out so far.
How long has he been in Germany?
6 years.
6 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So he talks to his children on the phone, but
not the
He
same.
hasn't been back to see them.
No.
Yeah.
No.
If you leave, you risk.
He cannot.
Yeah.
I mean,
Go
they
back
come without passports.
Yeah.
They cannot leave the country and go back.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's no way. And for some people, it's really stressful since the families expect them to earn money, send money to Africa.
Right. Yeah.
And if they will be sent eventually back home, their mission is a complete failure.
Right.
And this would be devastating for them.
Yeah. They are the lifeline for their families.
Yeah.
Back home. And so.
And I mean, they don't get much money from the welfare system, but they really try to eat as little as they can and really try to save money and send it back home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we have a church get together, they really eat a lot.
Oh, yeah.
The potlucks.
Yeah.
Well, that's a sweet, even that is, something as simple as food, but is a sweet blessing of the church that they can bring to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's why there's plenty of friendship and joy and food and
everybody brings food. I mean, the elderly as well as the Africans.
Right.
And it's a nice mixture. So
I'm sure.
Try different things.
So do the Germans eat the African food and do the Africans eat the German food? They do.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
So these people that come into your church, are they then mostly individuals that are just representatives of their families back home? Or are there families now that you have in your church?
Yeah, it's both, actually.
Okay.
So there are quite a number of young men who are maybe 23 by now.
Right.
And but there are also some families with young children. Yeah.
So that's changed the dynamic of your church quite a bit.
Yeah.
So was this something that your church, I mean, you knew these immigrants were coming in. Did you guys decide like, okay, they're going to be near our church. This is a ministry we need to take on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And since we have some of these activists who were in Germany already for 10 or 15 years, and they do speak German pretty well, actually, and they work. So they actually helped the other
kind of
Africans,
that's
to
neat.
integrate too. Yeah.
So everyone in the church was pretty like, yeah, we want to do this. This is
it was not everyone. I mean, it was difficult for the elderly people.
That's
of
what I was
course.
going to ask
Most of them do not speak English.
Right.
Some do a little bit, but so what we actually had, we have 2 services each Sunday.
Okay.
One is in German. So all the Germans, of course, come to the early service. And then more and more Africans actually who at least understand quite a bit of German, even if they don't speak much, stay in the early service. And we have all the scripture words put on a beamer and translated into English.
Right.
And also one of us sits in the back and translates the sermon.
Wow.
So the second service is in English.
The second service is in English. We do have an African pastor now. So
cool.
He does the service in English.
Well, so even, you mentioned Ghana, Nigeria, even in these different African countries, there's even different languages that they
most
probably
of them
represent.
Most of them speak English.
Okay.
Some also speak French.
Okay.
Okay.
And of course the local dialect, but we
Right.
cannot help them.
We can't quite help with that. So when you say we are back there translating, who is that? Is that you?
That's me. Also, I have to admit that Jürgen writes the sermon in English for me.
Oh, nice. Nice.
When one of these African ladies translates, she actually can do it without having the translation.
Notes. Yeah.
Yeah, so she's pretty good.
Nice.
With her
That's a
German.
huge
Yeah.
blessing.
So do you go to both services?
I actually go only to the first one because this church happened to be in my hometown. So up to the time my mom actually came to move to the city where we live in,
Right.
which is an hour away, I always went to see her.
I see. Yeah.
Since my father had passed away a few years ago. And so second service, it's very charismatic. And I have a hard time understanding the pastor actually too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so there's a lot of singing and dancing and shouting to the Lord. Jürgen does actually. He does stay.
He stays for both.
For both. Yeah. So I now had to find my role being a pastor's wife. Among all the refugees. And I think what the Lord really told me was how I can try to have the people come to church, feel welcome, feel loved. We spent a lot of time with them. We had after every service we have like a time for coffee and cookies and then I get to talk to the ladies and the men, and they come up with a lot of different things, like letters that they get from city administration and that they don't understand.
Oh, yeah.
So we have to translate a lot for them. And also we went numerous times to the city administrations together with them to have their permit to stay extended. Yeah. And it really makes a lot of a difference if a white person, a
German is with them.
Yes, they are so much more friendly. And especially when Jürgen goes and shows his business card with the doctor, and that makes a big difference.
It does.
Yeah, so it's so
that itself is
curious how they treat these Africans. I mean, some are treated very nicely and well, and then they get a permit to stay for another 6 months, or even get a work permit. And others, just, I mean, it's so unfriendly. It's unheard of.
So, by the nature of their insecure status in whether they can stay or not or whatever, I'm sure there's a lot of feeling of, well, we only have 2 weeks together, maybe not, or 6 months together. So how does that affect how you all minister to them or disciple them?
I mean, of course, we try to encourage them to learn the language as much as they can, but it's often difficult, and especially for the mothers, it's very difficult because there's no childcare.
Right.
And some of the men just don't get a permit for a German class. So that's very difficult.
Yeah.
And then we also encourage them to ask for a job or to ask for an apprenticeship. I mean, this is the only way they can get a permit to stay.
Right.
If they have a permanent work,
right.
If they can sustain themselves,
right.
then
and
they
learning
eventually
the
probably
would be a big help.
Yeah, that would be a big help too. Yeah.
So I would guess there'd be a lot of conversations about just, the fear that they live in and trusting God with that.
We prayed a lot for them in the service and of course individually too with them and at home for them.
Yeah. Have you seen a lot of them really growing in faith? And
we actually will have probably an elders election coming up soon. And we are thinking about one of them, to ask one of them whether he would serve as an elder.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah.
That's
very nice, yeah.
So it really is such a blending of, I know you have these two services, but you now have this African pastor, you have Jürgen, you have now possibly elders that are coming from both sides. So this church is in like 6 years. It's taken on a completely different.
I mean, really, it went from almost being like a dying church.
It was, yeah.
To
that's why they actually had asked Jürgen to come in to try to somehow come up with ideas to revive the church.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, God had
a plan.
Yeah.
So is there much co-fellowship between the two churches, or are they or the two services? I mean those two groups of people.
What we have is, every Sunday we have these two services, and on the last Sunday each month we have a joint service.
Oh, sweet.
Oh, okay.
So, which is in both languages, basically. So we translate a lot.
Yeah. Is that more not as charismatic?
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, that's right.
That's funny.
They all try to be a little understanding of one another.
Each other,
Yeah.
They're probably really good for each other.
Yeah.
You know?
Actually, there is a lot of connection between both sides. And for instance, we had one of the Africans. He had a stroke at an early age, and so once he was out of the hospital, he needed rides to go to physiotherapy.
Right.
And many of these elderly ladies. They gave him a ride. Yeah. I mean, every other day. I mean, that was really sweet.
Intense.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because they were hardly able to talk to them. No?
Right.
Yeah,
but they really made a commitment.
I
give you a ride, and then I wait and give.
Isn't that the
bring
amazing
you back and,
thing?
These little things that really make a difference.
Yeah.
And others that are in Germany already for a more extended time, they came and took care of our old ladies sometimes. So that was really nice. So they just visited them. And
the Africans did?
The Africans did,
that's neat.
Yeah.
This is the extension of relationship and friendship and care and love, and especially when you're an immigrant, which you even got a little bit of a taste of when you came here. So you kind of can relate to them.
Exactly.
That you're in this needy place. You know, your baby's in the hospital prematurely. You're in a country you don't know. And God just kind of gives you exactly what you need through these people.
Exactly. It's like God uses your experience here in the States.
Although,
to prepare
it was so much easier for us.
Right.
Having a job and not having to fear to leave to the country.
Right.
You know, but you can relate to this. So I really wanted to make a point to, make these people welcome and help them out, and as much as I can. And then we also have get-togethers on Sundays, on Saturday afternoons. Not on every Saturday, but once a month we have like a game afternoon where they can just come in. We also hope we have lots of invitations that during the week we put in the mailboxes all around the church.
Nice.
So we hope eventually some Germans, younger Germans, will come too. But it has been really difficult to get them in. Sometimes there's somebody or a family showing up, and then they come only once for this game afternoon, and they don't come to church. And so that's a kind of relaxing time for the Africans, and they don't know any board games. not even the children. I mean the children they play soccer. Or they have their smartphones. And
oh wow,
this is awful. I hate this. So I really try to teach them some board games. Or do some artworks.
Do they like it?
Yeah, they do.
Oh,
they enjoy that.
How many kids are there?
Oh, there are tons of kids actually. Compared to the size of of the church, we have like 50 members at the church, and there are now at least 25 children. Maybe.
Wow, that's half.
Wow,
yeah, all ages. And now I really try to teach them more or less every Sunday school.
Oh, good.
But it's very difficult because you have kids like from age 1 to 10.
Yeah, it's a big range.
We have very little space. I mean, the room is very small. it's such a different crowd of kids. Yeah. So many different ages.
And do you do that in German or English?
I do in German. I mean, they do well. Yeah. They go to kindergarten, they go to school. So they speak German among themselves.
Right. Yeah.
So they actually often have to translate for their parents. Yeah, they do very well in German.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
But it's nice. And you see the people really seem to love it, and they feel welcomed. And that's what I wanted to show.
So what's been the greatest maybe challenge to ministering to immigrants and to having this blend of a church?
They have different needs, like when you think of a service. It's hard to combine these very different cultures. I mean, I've seen in the other service, in the African service, they can just go on for hours and hours singing. Yeah. And you could not do this to the German.
Right.
Germans have their schedules.
Yeah. Actually, that's true. That's very true. And not all of the German ladies actually come to the joint service because they know it's different.
It's a little longer than they...
It's getting better, but it's just a lot of cultural differences.
Yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
It is neat to hear, though, how it seems like they've both been able to have compassion for one another.
Yeah,
as they've
that's true.
Sort of seen their struggles, their weaknesses, and need for help. And it sounds like God has used this for both of these different, very different groups of people.
Yeah, you're right.
To be softened towards one another and to grow in just Christian love and community amongst such very different cultures. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just sitting here thinking like, okay, how can all this translate over to us here in America? You know, I mean, we have immigration here too, you know. But what can be our takeaway, you know, from this? And I just think there's always people around us who are different from us and from our preferences, you know. Maybe just differentiating between what our preferences are and like
and
where hard lines actually should be drawn, kind of thing. But to be open to loving people who are different than us and to be willing to get out of our, you know, our comfort zones.
Yes,
and
I mean, but little things really, like coming on time. This is such a big thing. I mean, the German ladies really want to start their service at 10 o'clock. And then, I mean, if you come into the church at 10 o'clock, they are the Germans. And there's maybe one or two of the Africans. Yeah. And we also have a piano player who's a young man. He goes to a Bible seminar. And he's very good with playing the piano. And he comes every Sunday, but not at 10 o'clock. So, and this can drive these old ladies crazy. Right. When it starts like 10 minutes past or even 15 or 20 minutes past because this guy hasn't shown up. Yeah. Yes. And then during the service, more and more people come in. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And, you know, this is, I mean, for Africans, they are just not used to
being punctual.
Each year I practice a Christmas play with the kids. Yes. Oh, yeah. And that's the same issue because we have only very limited time in between the two services where we can practice. And then these kids don't show up. But of course, they all want to have the main role, you know, and that can drive you crazy. I mean. Really and discipline in general. I mean, having the children disciplined. Yeah. I mean, they can be so loud and just do what they want and shouting and, you know, that's difficult too. We have to teach the women how to deal with the children. And,
so there's probably an element in which, you know, they're coming into Germany. And so an element in which they need to learn some German culture and be respectful of that, right? But then particularly the church also being understanding that they've come from a very different culture and just...
Yeah, it just all takes time.
Yeah.
You have to be patient with each other. Yeah.
So how has this impacted you spiritually, your walk with God? I mean, you were a little bit nervous about being a pastor's wife, so this was kind of like jumping in the deep end, I guess.
That's right. Well, I see how much the Lord has blessed us as a family and coming to Christ and being part of the Christian family. And so I really hope I can give back to those families and let them know how much we love them and that they are Christian sisters and brothers to us, no matter where they come from. So I really try to do as much as I can to help them. And I mean, I'm glad I've found something that I really can do and offer them. And
I just think it's neat that you had that in a way demonstrated for you, which is in part what led you to faith, to have this, to be in a different country and have a Christian community come wrap their arms around you, exactly. And show you that kind of love at a time that was hard, difficult for you. Then you were able to take that, to your own country and do the same for others. And that's what Christian community is. And it doesn't matter, what country or what culture. There's a bond in Christ that we all have.
You're right.
That's awesome.
As Christians, the scripture's full of talking about caring for the orphan, the widow, and the sojourner or the stranger among you.
Yeah, I mean, I try to let them know to how many difficulties these people had gone and how much they deserve our love and how the Lord has been good to us. And He has done so much for us, and we have such a comfortable life, and so we ought to give something back from these experiences, the love that we received from the Lord, to give it back to those people.
Monumental is hosted by Katie Walker and Amy Molina. It is produced and edited by Katie Walker, and it is executive produced by Nathan Alberson and Jake Menzel. If you like the show, please don't forget to rate and review in the app of your choice. And if you're interested in more great content, including articles and other podcasts, please visit warhornmedia.com.